Hello everyone, I hope you're doing uncommonly well. I thought you might like to come and sit with me in my sewing room / bedroom and observe the fog behind me. I had some thoughts about the fog. We are in the middle of a very foggy winter and also very dark, and I thought today how I would like to share with you so many things. In the last 2 weeks that I've been gone, I've been making notes. I have been busy about the house with other demands on my time, always wanting to come back. And so I'm trying to discipline myself to come here when it's very early in the morning instead of waiting till everything is put in place, everything's cleaned up, the kitchen's clean, the floor is swept. That won't work. And so today when I was looking at this fog, I thought to myself, why aren't we as thrilled with a foggy day as we are with a sunny day? You know, they always say the sun has vitamin D, it has so many benefits. Why can't they find something that is beneficial about fog? Now, I remember a few years ago, if you'll go and search in my little search area on my blog, where I have all the articles from the past, and type in fog fashion. Remember, I made about 15 fog capes and coats out of thin fleece fabric because I wanted to see what they would be like from the patterns, and I didn't buy anything expensive. And I also made coats, and you helped me buy the buttons, remember? Well, that was fog fashion. And then I had a fog tea where my family and I sat around and drank white tea and ate things that were foggy and white and fluffy. And so I thought about having a fog fiesta or a fog celebration, and we should get up in the morning and say, it's fog today, let's celebrate, let's do something. We could even have get-togethers to celebrate fog. We could say, it's foggy, do you want to come over and have something hot to drink or share a sandwich or something? And I thought, why don't we change that attitude we have that no weather is nice except the sunny weather, and let's see what a difference it would make in our lives. Maybe you will have a memory of something you made or something you created, or maybe a wall you painted because it was hard to go out and do anything else. So today I'll also like to talk to you about getting dressed up. I'm wearing my work apron, so I'll just show you what that looks like. It kind of harkens back to the old days of the housemaid, and I got it at Hobby Lobby a few years ago, and I really do like it. And then since I have been gone, in the evenings when I'm too tired to do anything else, I've been getting on some videos and watching people describe the Jane Austen era, which I've become more interested in, and I found a few that were showing how to do the Austen or Regency era hairstyles, and I have tried to emulate them. Didn't do a very good job. My hair didn't cooperate, and so I did the best I could. But I enjoy watching them. I got to thinking how people like to watch people do things. And there's sometimes ladies worry about greatness. Oh, am I going to do something great? Am I ever going to amount to anything? Is my life going to count for anything? Remember Christy in the book by Catherine Marshall, Miss Alice asked her, why did you come here to the Appalachians? And she said, well, I wanted my life to count for something. And she said, did you want your life to count for something, or are you just running away from home? And so, but at home we can make our lives count for something. And I got to looking around at what people were doing and how many views they got. The lady that was doing the hairstyles was getting more views than a formerly popular news station online. And the man that was stealth camping was getting twice as many as, I don't want to name one of the alphabet channels. And there was another man long time ago I noticed he was stuck at home. When I say long time ago, it was when all this war started and we were shut down and shut up and squeezed into our houses and told we couldn't do anything and couldn't talk to anybody. He started reporting about fresh food, and he had some things that he had either got at the grocery store or grown, and he would cut a pear in half, and he would sample it online and then give it a review and tell the history of that pear, what country it originated in, and then he would go and get something else. And people just enjoyed watching him create this plate of food, just prepare food. And he got more views than some of the Hollywood stars. And so what is greatness? Greatness is the things we do ourselves as people at home, and how much we miss by not watching someone, not being able to sit and watch someone prepare food or sew. And there are even channels I watched that had women who were making quilts, and they would explain how things go together and why it had to be this way, and how to do it on the machine or how to do it by hand. And so what we're missing is children growing up at their mother's elbow watching them do things, and instead of rushing through the housework and saying, oh, I have to sweep this floor again, I have to wash these dishes again, they should be done with dignity and with glory. And that is what children like to watch. They would like to watch their mothers do things. And you can see that on these videos, so many things, adventures and camping and all kinds of, there was one man I watched that he just went for a walk. That's all he did, and it was called Walk and Talk. And he just went for a walk, and you got to see where he was on a farm road somewhere, and there were so many. It was a live stream, and oh my, he had so much more attention than the Congress of the USA. That's got cameras in it. Nobody watches it. So it just shows you what greatness really is and what we really are interested in, and how out of touch the powers that be really are. And so the things that you do at home are your greatness. Have you knit anything lately? Have you, I don't like acrylics and nylons. They're all the oil products. They're made out of oil products, but unfortunately my house has got a few of those things in them, and I think it contributes to our breathing problems and our sleep disorders and digestive problems, and we're going to have to get rid of them. I'm planning on buying some all cotton batting or wadding, the kind of things you put in a quilt, and some all cotton stuffing, and I'm going to make our pillows out of cotton with cotton pillowcases that I make. But then of course you have to wash a lot of this stuff because it still has chemicals and things in it. But we can do a lot. Our greatness is not defined by how much attention you get from the media or from people. And so our greatness lies in the small things, and in the, there are a lot of people, you can read a history book, and I'm homeschooling, you can read a history book, but it only gives you the history that the different governments that won the wars laid out for you. There was history behind the history that we don't know about. There were a lot of people alive that led great lives. They brought their children up in the Lord, and they did what was right, and they had honorable businesses, and the families worked together in cohesion. They didn't make the history books, did they? But there is greatness in the small things that you do. And this is one of the reasons why I'm reading the Jane Austen diet book, because women at home, and this is a homemaking broadcast, and if you're new here, please click the link in the description box and go to the post on which I have placed this video, this broadcast, so that you can see the summarization of it and maybe some extra photographs from the manse. And so today I am going to show you a few things about, or explain to you a few things about why it's so important in the morning, even on a fog day like this, to get all dressed up. I also watched a Jane Austen, I guess you would call it a demonstration or tutorial on the Jane Austen look, the makeup. They would pinch their cheeks. And so I did go outside for my little Jane Austen walk in this fog. It is so foggy, ladies, you cannot see my front porch until you get up close to it. And flashlights don't work. You just have to edge your way around. But it does put some color in your face. Now, some people have asked me about my my skincare and makeup. And thank you for saying I'm pretty, but isn't it a shame? You have to wait till you're 70 before somebody says you're pretty. Now, I think if you've got girls, and boys too, you tell them that they're very good looking, that they're very pretty. It's very important, I think. You go through your life and people tell you you're funny looking. Or when I was growing up, I had a big gap between my front teeth. And so when I smiled, I felt it looked clownish. It looked silly. But then, by the time I would say 25, that gap had filled in. Just my jaw grew or something. Something changed. I haven't had dental work, but the gap is gone. And you can see this maybe in my book, Just Breathing the Air. On the cover is a picture of me with a big smile. And but not too many close-ups. So, yes, I think you feel funny looking and awkward when you're younger, and then by the time you're 70, somebody might tell you you're pretty. That's so funny. So I always tell all my descendants how pretty they are. I think that's important. I know we don't want them to be vain or worried about their looks, but I think everybody is good looking. It's just that the world has so many strange ways of making them look strange. The hairstyles, the makeup, the clothing, it all detracts from their good looks. And so I've tried, as I've gotten older, to only go as traditional and natural as I can, because a hairstyle like this is that Jane Austen one, would look good on a little girl just as much as it would look on an old granny. And it's really nice to be elderly and do whatever I want and say whatever I want, because people will say, they'll just put it up to, they'll just chalk it up to the ravings of an old woman. And you can just get away with it. Don't mind me, because I'm just talking. And so these things that I'm saying on this broadcast today for homemakers are just my opinion, and just to keep you company while you go on your little walk or your stroll. I don't want to call it a walk. I want to call it a stroll, because when you tell women to go for a walk, they just march along and they mean business, and then they check it off their list, and it's not the same thing. And as I had read to you in the Jane Austen Diet, Mr. Kozlowski, he's an honorary grandson, he explained that they appreciated and the scene around them, the nature around them, and felt that it was a bad to neglect appreciating or neglect seeing it, so they had to go out and walk. They also kept different hours than we keep. One of the reasons we have that creepy house syndrome is because by the time they finished maybe their last meal at 4 o'clock that'd be from around 1789 to 1835, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't studied it intensely. I mainly read about the Jane Austen era from books people have written, and thankfully people have been sending me links, and someone sent me a link to Jane Austen's Religion and Jane Austen's Politics and a few other things. We'll have to read it to you with commentary, because it's not very interesting if you don't have something witty to say like he did. And they would finish their last meal at 4 o'clock, and then the gloom would start to descend. Well, then they'd light their lights and start getting ready for bed, and they'd have their prayers, and they would go to bed, maybe talk a lot like we did when we were kids. In bed, we'd talk a lot, and our parents were always saying, "Be quiet, go to sleep." But they didn't say, "Oh, it's 6 o'clock now, I've got 4 more hours before I go to bed, what'll I do?" And then start to get nervous because the darkness was coming, or there was an atmosphere. They were asleep during all that time. And so let's go back to getting dressed. And I think it's really important, even if you're not feeling well, go and bathe yourself and refresh yourself. And sometimes I find if I just put one drop, I want to explain to you about essential oils, because it takes 40 oranges, just the peels alone, to make a tiny vial of orange oil. And so what I like to do sometimes, put 1 drop of orange oil in the bath, because it's the happiness scent. And I have also used it for other things to refresh the home. I've put it in a spray bottle with other ingredients to make it to refresh the house, the inside of the house, because in the winter it gets kind of stuffy, although I do leave the door open sometimes. But let's go back to getting dressed and it starts with getting yourself bathed, getting your face washed, getting your hair fixed, and spending some time alone. I know we don't like to do that because we're so busy, and we have descendants, children and grandchildren, and we have the people on hand that we have to look after. And one of the reasons I haven't been here in a while is because my dryer stopped working, but it was not unexpected, because it belonged to my husband's mother, and she had it in the 1960s, I believe. And it was a miracle that I still have it. But my daughter had got online and learned how to repair the old thing, and so she gave me 10 more years of use, and I'd like to have more, but because of that, I have to hang things on racks around the house, and then they have to be ironed, because it's not the same as coming out, wrinkle-free out of the dryer. And we're in the middle of a very cold, wet winter, and so I've just been wrapped up in this, and then my washer's not working very well either. And so as much as I can, I wash a few things by hand. And of course this takes up a lot of time, but I do have a benefactor, somebody who is selling their home and going to give me their washer and their dryer, which are new, because they're going to buy something else for their next residence. And so it's going to be a while before I can get it, because I've got to get everything straightened out so they can put it in, and they're not quite ready. So I have been so busy with that, plus people, and some of my children have come over, and also a few friends, and so I've been really tied up. So if you have not got dressed yet, even if you're just going to sit there today and you're not feeling well, then I would suggest you go get bathed, and then get dressed up and come and sit down and listen, or take me with you when you go for your stroll, or you start to work. And usually we start in the kitchen for some reason. And so have you ever thought of getting dressed up for checking your mail? Just, I have a big box out at the end of the drive, and when I go and check it, every now and then a tractor will go by, or I'm out in the fields here, and I thought, it would be nice if when they went by, they didn't have to look at how crazy I look. So I've been wearing a nice coat when I go out there, at least to cover up my work clothes, to check it and create some kind of dignified scene in the whole process experience. So think about getting dressed up for a walk. Do you ever watch any of the films depicting the old eras, the 1800s, 1900s, early 1900s, and the 1700s, and just to go to a shop, a woman would be dressed up and wearing a hat. I have been reading more about hats and head coverings. They had head coverings inside the house, but they weren't religious. They weren't wearing hats and head coverings for any religious reason. The hats inside of the house apparently kept the dust off their hair, or were just added a little bit of protection or warmth on their head. Remember what I call the mob cap, which also is the little cap that the maids wore, and I've been studying more about that and how they were worn. And I think head coverings for women, and I'm not speaking of it in a religious sense, but they were abandoned by fashion after the 1960s, I think. And it's so sad, because I have been watching 2 old series of videos online, and one is the Pallisers and the other one is Poynton Place. And I noticed that even the Regal ladies that were the landowners, they wore the little caps inside the house. And So there are some people that feel that a woman is healthier with something on her head. And I do remember back in the days of the homestead, the women had always had something on their head, even in the daytime, even if they weren't religious. It was they believed that it kept their body warm. So have you thought about getting dressed up for going on your walk, checking your mail, even your email? Have you thought about getting dressed up, dignified, to check your email, or to write a letter, answer a note, or how about getting dressed up just to pray, okay, or to make your list? How about getting dressed up to do your laundry, or to clean your kitchen, or to read a book? How about getting dressed up so that you don't have to suddenly run into your room or the bathroom and change should you have to go somewhere? One of the things I like about long coats is it doesn't matter what you're wearing at home. If you have to go somewhere, you put that long coat on, it covers up everything, and you don't have to change. You can get these long coats for dusters, I guess they're called, for the summer too as well. And so getting dressed up creates a habit. And once you get in that habit, then it lessens the chances of getting depressed. Not saying you won't, have your down times or get that creepy house feeling, but at home is so important. We really need to keep up and keep lifted up. You read about in history. I have one of my descendants that likes history, and he was telling me a few things about history, and I remembered reading myself of men who had were in military and had, back in the 1800s, gotten isolated from everybody, but still would try to bathe, and still would try to put on, keep their clothes clean, and still would try to have a proper meal, and eat properly, and behave like human beings. And unfortunately, our clothing that's been sold to us in stores for so many years do not give us a feeling of dignity or a feeling of I guess structure, and it does affect our minds. It really does. And we've been told that you shouldn't have to worry about clothing. The modernists wanted us to forget about it, not to worry about what we were wearing. And of course, the Bible does say don't worry about what you eat or what you wear, because God's going to provide it all. But it doesn't say to abandon it completely. And so get dressed up the best you can. I'm digging further into my closet and wearing things around the home that probably would have just hung there till I got invited somewhere. And if you'll notice, ladies, we're not getting invited out as much, are we? And this began even before the war. I noticed 20 years ago the lack of hospitality and the lack of interest in having people, visit or preparing teas for other people. And whereas it was all the rage at one time, now it seems to have waned. The next generation did not pick up on it, and so we're probably going to be at home. But we can prepare for ourselves and for our families a bit of hospitality. So dress up for hospitality. Now, one of the reasons I like to wear something like this is it has sort of a maid feeling to it. So now I'm in my maid role, and I'm going to go and clean up some things and, straighten up some things. And I just feel more like I'm in the role. And then I will take this off, put a little jacket over it, and do something else maybe. But dressing up and dressing well for the day is a way of exercising our faith. Because it says, I'm a human being, God created me, and He has a purpose for me, and I am carrying out His will by looking after the things that are before me, the things that I see that need to be done, that are in my home. And there are several scriptures that admonish women to be in the home and to look after the home. And sadly, we've always had, ever since the 1960s that I noticed, we've always had this older generation of women that were a huge disappointment, because though they would come to church and they taught children's classes and they taught ladies' classes, they always avoided the Bible mandate of, it should be woman date, shouldn't it? And of being homemakers, of guiding the home and guarding the home. And they didn't warn us that if we left the home for a long period of time during the day, we'd be perpetually behind, perpetually in a panic mode, trying to catch up with things, and reliant evermore on convenience things, and then it would lead to poor health. And no one warned anyone about that. But these women left their post, and then they continue to come to church. They are the best Christian women you would ever meet, but they don't obey that, Titus 2. And a lot of it is, they've been told that the economy is more important than anything else, that we must work because then we won't get a pension, and then we won't get, and then our families will starve, and even a man will work at some job he should never be working at, that is highly unacceptable and inappropriate, will work someplace that is not honest, because the Bible says a man should work. So they use this work thing and taking care of your family and feeding your family. They hide behind that, and then they go and do exactly what they want to do, and not realizing that God's got his hand in it too. And so many women who decided not to leave their post, not to stop guarding the home and guiding the home, they stayed home, and they did it on faith. Of course, they put things in order so that they would not have to buy new things all the time, because they tried not to waste. They tried to always look for the best bargains, and they were careful to be thrifty at home to help them earn their salary in a way at home. And people wondered how did they do it. But there's more going on there than just trying to figure out how this balances. My husband makes so much money, the house costs so much to run, and how are we going to get the money to do this or that? They start worrying about that. But when you start putting God first, then you start putting your family first, and you start putting the home first. And even if you're alone, and I know a girl who is alone, and she has found so much to do, and she manages to make a little money, and she has found so much to do that she wouldn't have had time to get locked up in a job. And this way, she's free. And there aren't enough free people, both young men and young women, around. When my children were teenagers, word got around that they were able to help. And so they'd be calling my son or my daughter wanting something, a quilt made or something done, or then calling. And another girl I know that was homeschooled, someone in the church asked her to come and sit with her aged mother while she went and did the shopping. And so, but there's no one available for this. There's no one home, and all the children, young children, are scuttled away to schools and colleges, so they're not available in their families or their communities. But there is so much to do, and they usually compensate you. And these children, if they're living at home and don't have to pay a huge rent or overhead, actually do manage to make some money. And so if you put God first and you put his will first, and of course people can always twist that, they can say, well, it wouldn't be God's will for me to let my family starve, so I must go to work outside the home. But that is taking it a little far. And so if you want to go beyond, it's a way of exercising your faith. If you want to go beyond your belief in Christ and put it into practice by keeping the home. And I don't know if it's 1 or 2 Timothy 5:14 where it talks about that the women should be keepers of the home. And it's so sad, because members of the church, the ladies in the church, they know what the gospel is, and they know what it takes to be saved, and they are very strict about it and how that happens. But when it comes to some of these other scriptures like Titus 2, guarding and guiding the home, they just shrug their shoulders at it, and they don't realize that, yes, you can be saved, but then you have to grow. And this is part of your growth, is knowing these, is starting to understand and open up your mind to these other things in the Bible that we have to do as Christians. And I believe the Apostle Paul told Timothy to grow thereby. And he didn't mean, get 100,000 people in the church. He meant spiritually to improve your manners, improve your wisdom, improve your knowledge, improve your good judgment. And so this is, keeping the home and taking care of the home is your reasonable service. And dressing up, doing your best is your reasonable service. I like to choose an era that I like and go and find somebody who's online who's teaching how to, dress the clothing and to create that look. And even though I try, I'm trying to do the Regency Austin World look. I'm trying. At least I'm trying. And so that is your reasonable service. So your homemaking, you're getting ready. That is your reasonable service. Now let's go on to the house, the care of the house. Now everybody's different and every home is different. I don't know why I'm pulled into the kitchen first thing, but I just like that to be neat and tidy. Sometimes people leave things. I go to bed quite early, and sometimes, it's a bit messy. I like to get that all cleaned up. Or maybe I was very tired, went to bed, and then in the morning woke up and found that I had not put things away. So I'm drawn to the kitchen. And I like to leave the bedroom a little bit and roll the covers down and air it out. Just air out the sheets. And I try to wash them once a week and replace them once a week, sheets and pillowcases. I know there are rich people who have them changed every day. Wouldn't that be nice? And I put out clean towels every day. We don't use the same towels or the same washcloths. It's not, they just collect a lot of bacteria, especially if they're wet. And so I like clean ones and clean dry ones. And that's one thing that's kept me so busy lately is because I don't have a dryer. But I was a homesteader and we lived in the wilderness in Alaska. I know how to do all those things. Not sure I really know how to start a fire anymore, but I could renew the interest. And so your home is something to live up to, is your home. It's a task to live up to. Do you slump when you start walking through your house? It's one of the things that I had suggested to you to get yourself, your mind settled in the morning when you get up, is to get up and get dressed and do a walkthrough to warm your body up. Walk back and forth with no purpose, just walk back and forth, and pretty soon you'll find you become happier. I know that people of the past spent more time walking and more time outside. So they were about equal, about out in the fresh air just as much as they were in. And they considered the indoors stale air and not exactly good for you. And so that explains why they would bundle themselves up in the middle of a very harsh winter and go outside. And they thought it was extremely, extremely good for you. And so if you have this attitude of slumping as you walk through your home, then you feel defeated. That is a sign of defeat, is the slumping. But instead, you should lift your body up through your core and stand up so you can get these two. I guess that's just the collarbone, isn't it? Just kind of lift that up a little bit and walk through. I'm afraid many people slump because they feel that if they stand up straight, they look like they're haughty, and other people think that they're stuck up or something if they have any dignity. It's the same with dressing well. People think that you think you're better than they are if you dress up, fix your hair, and they think you're vain. But it's only natural. Do you know the process, both of cleaning your house, sweeping? The other thing was to sweep. Go ahead and sweep. Walk through, get dressed, do a walkthrough until you feel your body warming up. Even in summer when it's really hot, it does great things for your mind. And so go ahead and do that. And if you live in a little holiday camper or a caravan, something like that, and the weather's not good or you don't want to go outside, there's always enough space to walk a little bit and turn around and come back. And sometimes there are little steps. You can go up and go down. That's very good for you. Just walk up and down and just listen to me while you go, and I'll entertain you. Maybe I'll read to you. And just take it or leave it. This is just my opinion, and not everybody is the same. It's just a few things that I have observed and taken lots of notes while I've been hanging out my laundry. So women not following the Bible that are still in the church and considered great Christian women, they're also coming from a culture that taught them from, they probably spent 12 years in a school, and schools are just, we sort of look at them fondly. We get the school album, and we look at the adventures and the friendships we formed, but we don't realize what was done to us was a system of persuasion, very slyly persuading us that the home was not important. And everything we did from the age of, let's say, 6 to 18 was focused on what our obligations to the school, to the education was. And so then you get these full-grown women coming in the church. They agree that the doctrine is right, and they're saved, and they agree that it's good to worship, and we're trying to worship to please God. But when it comes to something like Titus 2, they just draw a blank, because it's not, they don't think it's required. They don't realize it's part of your reasonable service. It's part of your personal growth. So when you read that scripture that says, glorify God in your bodies, and also it concludes, for this is your reasonable service. Let's look up, what do you think is a reasonable service? Well, homemaking is a reasonable service. The Bible teaches women to be guards and guides of the home. Isn't that not reasonable? It's not only reasonable, but it seems to fit in with our bodies and with our moods and our emotions, and how important it is to be at home. I know sometimes we can get a better grip on ourselves if we're home and not constantly in places like places of work, where you have to deal with people and their crazy personalities. And we have that at home, of course, but I believe we're more accepting at home. So the house gives you a sense of dignity, and you need to be treating it as a fine inn, especially in these days when a lot of people just feel like they are more isolated. There are plenty of states in the U.S. now where they're no longer following these mandates, and so people are more free. But even as we free up, I've gotten where I don't like it as much. I used to really enjoy going, and I'd go to the dollar store, and I'd go to the post office, and I'd go to the grocery store, and I'd go to one of the big box stores or some little store. But after the way they treated us, and after all the tension it put on us, I'm not as interested in doing that anymore. I'm interested in something different. I have been ordering a lot, and that's why I so appreciate your donations, because I do use them to order some of the things that I need. And so if you want to get started, then do a slow walk through the house, pick up, and your mind starts to be more creative. And also walk around. Even if you're in a small space, you can walk around and get warmed up. And even on hot days, that's very important. Now, I want to also talk to you a little bit about adding. One of the problems with teaching our young girls or boys at home is making it all very dry and educational, and not keeping the spiritual side and the emotional side out of it. And that's why it's so important when you clean house or keep house to add beautiful touches. And I would say you could probably find some natural things to add to it, or just things that are more creative, that add some beauty to the home. Instead of, anybody can be hired to sweep your house or wash your dishes, but you can put emotion into it, and you can put feeling into it, and you can add things that would make your children delight in being home. But one thing you have to do, I'm a sewist. This is my sewing room, and I like to make things, and I particularly like to make clothing. I know a lot of people are into quilting, and that's a quilt back there you see that my daughter made, and but I don't do that exclusively because you can't wear a quilt anywhere. And I like to make things to wear because the clothing in the stores have gotten where there are not so many natural fibers. And also I've become questioning about where they're made and whether that's really something I want to put my money into. But you have to be careful, because if you're a homemaker and you make bread and you make your kids' clothes and your clothes, you've made a quilt or two, or you just know how to keep house, there's somebody that I think in the world that will notice that and want to make merchandise of you, because they're out working and they can't do it, so they want you to do it for them, and they'll pay you. And the next thing you know, you're helping them. You feel so good, but at the same time you may be neglecting your own home, and even if you take your children with you, it's still not a healthy thing to do. Now, I know there's a scripture that talks about making merchandise of you, where it was chastising Christians to be careful, especially preachers, that people don't persuade you to teach their way. They called it making merchandise. I suppose you would be doing it for money. There's no chance of it here at the manse. There's no money. Our little congregation has no money. And so to prevent people from making merchandise of you, and I was discussing this with my son. He says there's always somebody that'll say, you're really talented. You've really got something to offer, and it just means they want you to get involved in their business. Or they'll say something like, you could add a lot to such and such of a group, and they just want you to come and pay a fee and belong to this enterprise or this club or something like that. And then there were years ago when my children were very busy making things, and my daughter made quilts, and she would do a little newsletter, and she would say, this is the quilt block of the month, and here's how you would do it, and here's what you need to make this quilt block. And people understood it, and they were making their own little quilt blocks and putting them all together. But one lady didn't get it, or she did get it, but she figured out that my daughter actually knew how to quilt, so she brought out of the blue a bag of fabric and some money, and she said, I need a quilt real quick for a new baby that's going to be born in my family. And she just handed her this stuff, and she said, and I want this quilt block here. And she just made an order right there. Well, we were just standing there stunned, and but she decided to. We sighed, and she decided to do it, but she told me while she was making this little quilt that it took the fun out of it. Because when she used to make a little baby quilt or a little lap quilt, it was fun, and it was for free, and it was because it was from her heart. She was thinking about that person when she was doing it. But when she got an order, it just went flat. It became a labor and a burden and a time schedule, like she was on a time limit, had to be done a certain time, and she began to breathe differently, get a stiff back. And these things, when people are making merchandise of you, are as terrible, such as homemaking, housekeeping. Once or twice someone has asked me, could you come to my house and show me how to do it? And I would give a few hints. Everybody's house is different, and I always feel kind of awkward telling somebody else how to do something in their house or how to arrange the refrigerator, because maybe they don't prepare food the same way I do. So I never enjoyed it. But then I found out that people would want me to come and clean their house. And of course they would offer to pay because they thought that I was so poor, and that because I was home, that maybe I couldn't get a job. I've had people do that. They think you don't have a job and you can't work because you're not educated or something like that. It's really interesting what's going on here. A lot of people have been kind of chased out of their own jobs, and so these companies will hire anybody. You don't even have to fill out one of these forms that say what kind of education you had or what kind of skills you have. They'll just take anybody to do some of these jobs. But be careful that people don't make merchandise of you. I know of a lady who had a friend that was working in an office. Yes, she's working in an office, and she was sick, and she needed someone, and the boss said, well, can you find somebody? Because he couldn't. And so she found a friend that was a homeschool girl in her 20s, and her friend went and did a lot of that office work. And they were all questioning her, what do you do all the time? She said, well, I'm homeschooled, and I'm home, and I do a lot of other things, and I'm just available to help. But she finally had to quit because they would have just kept her there, forever. And she said, I've got other things to do. If you get caught in a business, you are stuck there in that facility. I mean, people think homemakers, oh, you're in the same house all day long, day after day, week after week. Well, what difference is that between that and the hairdressers or the office or the big box store or the mail delivery? You're sitting in that truck all day long delivering mail. But in the home, you have so much more variety. Remember, Mrs. Bennet, confined and unvarying. She really dashed that attitude. Mr. Darcy says, you don't find the society confined and unvarying. She said, no. And it is not confined and unvarying because you're free and you can plan whatever you want. It's not like if you're sitting in an office all day, you're doing what someone else is telling you to do all day. You cannot vary it. You can't repaint the walls. You can't rearrange the furniture. You cannot change the chemicals or anything. In the home, you have so much more control, and you can create the atmosphere that you want, and you can change things. And so it doesn't seem like you're in a confined, unvarying atmosphere because you can change. Life is different every day. The weather is different every day. You can plant things some days. You can harvest things other days. You go with the seasons, whereas working at a school or working in business doesn't care so much about what's going on in the season that you need to participate in. They have to follow a schedule. Now we want to get to talking a little bit more about people, because you will be dealing with people, and especially those who are at home now as homemakers. You're going to run into people who think they know something about homemaking, and they'll bring you something or tell you something that they did, and you think, why in the world are they telling me how they peeled a carrot or something? Well, because they want you to think that they are accomplished homemakers like you are, and they haven't been doing that. They've been buying everything already prepared, and now they're home because of the political circumstances or the financial circumstances of the company they work for. So now they're home and they're having to do things, and so they want to show you that they did things. They're doing things just like you. And I often think, why is she telling me how she made a salad? Because when I used to talk about that, nobody wanted to hear it. They just didn't like you talking about how you baked bread or anything, because they weren't doing it. The other thing is that when you get in a situation, now I was looking up in the Bible about all the circumstances surrounding certain accounts, and where were the wars of the world? Where were the wars and the political things going on? They were all going on, but not mentioned so much, because the main story was how the days that Jesus walked the earth. Or there was one I ran into the other day, it was in Matthew, where Jesus cooked a fish lunch for everyone, for the disciples, the apostles. And I hope I can find it and read that to you. It was very interesting that he had some fish. They didn't recognize him, but he was cooking fish so that they could stop and be refreshed and have a meal. And he was seen across the shore cooking it, and they didn't recognize him. And so when they saw him, he said, bring some more fish and then come and eat. And so I was very interested in the fact that he had created a picnic. And the thing is that these things were greater, they were mentioned, and they were greater than any of the world politics at the time. and I do wish I knew what I was doing here, and could find it as I talk to you. But you can find it yourself. And so then we get to working in this political tension that's going on all around us, which of course we wouldn't know unless it was for the media. And it's very hard. My goal in doing some of these lessons here was for it to be timeless, so that you could watch it 20 years later and get something out of it that would be helpful for going about your business at home. But in this kind of tension that goes on, and you can tell when people have been frightened by it all. There was a scripture here that I was going to read you that was going along with this, and it was, "Do not love the world." Oh, here it is. Now, you can test this against what's going on politically, and that people just trusted the government. They right away went out and did all the stuff that the government told them to do, got all the substances they were supposed to do, and covered their faces, and limited their activities, and locked themselves up in their home. And they did all this for a government that told them, that has never cared about them, and it's always telling us lies anyway. And when people listen to that and they take it to heart and they believe it, they become frightened. I remember being frightened back in the old days, because I went to public school, and one of the first things that they told us is we'd all have to do a drill and get under our desk, because there was going to be a bomb. And I think that for years I had this fright because of that. But it was in the social studies book, and they were teaching us these things. So frightened people get stiff and nervous, and they get very hostile, and they may shout at you and condemn you if you're not going along with the plot. And so that explains the change in personality of some people that you thought were very health oriented, had a successful business, very sensible, but as long as the political situation was calm, they were okay. That shows you where you put your trust in. When that changes, when the political situation changes, are you going to start getting more upset, or are you going to follow what God says? Are you going to follow them, or are you going to follow what God says? So frightened people get very hostile. They may shout at you and condemn you before they cut you off. And this explains some crazy stuff that you might not have been able to understand, like what happened to some of these people and what did I do? So in hard times, the true character is brought out. So when the Bible says, a friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity, think about saying that a different way. A brother is born for adversity. I was just made for this. This is where I shine, is in hard times. And so a brother is born for adversity. We're created. We naturally are created to accept challenges and to have purpose. And sometimes adversity is very healthy, but the weak among us and the ones that are not taught properly and have not absorbed God's word are going to be, we need to pity them, because their fright makes them very hostile and mean. Their real self starts to be revealed, and their real beliefs come out, and their real lack of faith comes out. And the anxiety and fear also can cause them to question you over and over, as though they are the police, and they will ask you, where are you going today, and are you going to wear a mask, and are you going to be home before the curfew, and all this, and they just pester you and pester you and pester you, because the questions come fast, and then when you don't answer them the way they want, they question again and again, trying to squeeze out more information, trying to get the real, and then they're trying to find out if you are going to obey what they believe. So anxiety and fear makes them question you over and over, to get a different answer maybe, or just to... Now, I remember years ago when we had the landline phones with the cord on them, and there was only one in the house, and I had answered the phone when my husband was away and got a phone number for someone who wanted him to call them back. So I did. I got the phone number and I gave it the name and everything and gave it to him. But he became concerned because he said, what did he want? Well, I didn't know. I only knew that this was the phone number and the man had called, and that was his name. Well, did he say what he wanted? And then he would ask me over and over, what did he want? So finally, what I did is I had another phone put in and created his own office area so that with an answering machine back in the day, and that way all the information would be there, and it wouldn't depend on what I wrote on that little message pad, because, you know, people forget, and maybe I didn't write everything, but I wrote at the time. But I could see that it was making him real concerned, and so he wanted to be not slothful in business, and he wanted to take care of things that he was responsible for. So that's just the only thing I know about when people are, when they have a little anxiety, they start to question you more, and so that stopped the anxiety. And so one way you can do with these people that just want to question you all the time is say, well, I'll give you the website, and I will give you the link, and I'll email you the information, and you can go read it for yourself. And so many times we can save. This one thing I love about this new internet era is that people don't have to ask you for information all the time, and you don't have to constantly be explaining things, and you can just give them a site or tell them just go look it up for yourself, and they do a pretty good job of it. Now, one thing that we have to do as homemakers is to have settled minds, and that's one reason I say some of the greatest things you can do is you're bathing and you're getting dressed and your walk through the house and you're sweeping, and then your list. And don't forget to start your day out with prayers, because have you ever thought about getting dressed up for the prayers? And start that day out and ask God to help you do the things that you're responsible for, to help you to complete everything and to give you the energy and the mind to do it. And also, as I'm ending this video today, I'd like you to also ask God to give us some relief from the fallout of this crazy war that we're going through. And I'm going to read from 1 John chapter 4, and this goes with what I was saying about how some people will follow everything the government says. They really think God inspired the government. A lot of these people don't even know God. So here, you'll really like this. 1 John chapter 4. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. You ever known any of these politicians to do that? And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming and now is in the world already. Little children, you are, he's talking to his brethren, called them little children. Little children, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Every time you start to get frightened about a new scam, a new scare, a new health problem, a new mandate, remember that's from the world. Those are people that don't acknowledge Christ. And so he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. So if you have Christ in you, and you can get Christ in you by reading this, it starts to go into your mind. It's just like I try to warn you about the public schools. Whatever they're reading and writing in the public schools is filling up their minds. This does that, and in a greater way, because it converts the heart and the soul. Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. So why not, with every scare, with every bit of anxiety, start to pray. They are from the world, therefore they speak from the world, and the world listens to them. Does that sound like a television set to you or a news media broadcast? We are from God. Whoever knows God listens to us. Whoever is not from God does not listen to us. He's speaking as an apostle. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. See, you can see the truth and the error right there. And how do you know the news media is error? Well, probably because they are broadcasting. Okay, so as I've come across an hour, having been here for an hour, I want to read something from Jane Austen, the Jane Austen. And I will get around to some of the other historical things. He was mainly writing about health. You understand that. There are a lot more aspects of that era that we could find, in fact, even in the Bible, by going into different studies. So, it's replicating a Regency dinner. I have read this to you before, but I thought you might like it. And that is have an early dinner, and also those of you who have stomach problems, try to eat carefully, more slowly, and less, and more natural. Control. In contrast to the modern practice of plating up food with preset portion sizes in the kitchen, Regency diners have far more control. I don't know if you remember a time, maybe in the 1950s, when everything came from the kitchen on your plate and was put on the table, but it really wasn't good for everybody's health. It made a lot of people overweight because may have been overabundant starch or overabundant added things, and maybe too much for a small person, and so that was a custom back in the olden days too. Their dinners were served in the French manner, meaning all the dishes were arranged on the table in the middle at once, in what we would now call family-style dining. Well, that's the way they've done it in America for a long, long time. And it had to be passed around, and you had to politely pass it, to the next person around you, and not take too much, and always leave some for the other person. And it said they helped themselves to the surrounding food, choosing exactly how much or how little they wanted to eat, not how much the cooks wanted to give them. In Austen world, you are your own master at the table. Talk. Austen is emphatic. The best dinners come with a large helping of conversation. In the boisterous dinner scene in Pride and Prejudice, there are at least 6 people talking at once, some in a voice rather louder than others. Noise and talk are dinner-time standards in Austen world, where people gather around the table for the sake of eating, drinking, and laughing together, and not just for the food. Food is very emotional, and that's one reason I have said be careful about what you talk about at the table, because it can actually, some of the things people talk about, they're not careful, and it can turn people's stomachs. And one of the worst things you can do, and if you're a little child at home, I'll just tell you, don't say, "Look, a bug. Look, a spider's in my food." You pass the plate to your mother, and they can quietly dispense of it and get you a new plate. But things that also don't talk about operations and surgeries and things that are revolting. Don't talk about your stomach ache. Don't talk about bodily functions or pain or injuries. Things that don't really go with food and can cause other people to be upset and also lose their appetite. Now, some of us really do need to lose our appetite. Where people gather around the table for the sake of eating, drinking, and laughing together, not just for the food. Though we've momentarily forgotten the secret in our rush TV dinner culture, anyone who has gone on a blind date will still recognize Austen's intuitive logic that people naturally eat less when they talk more. Dessert. In Austen world, you have one chance to eat dessert if you want it. You eat it immediately after dinner. Well, we've known for health reasons it's better to do that, because then you don't take sweets on an empty stomach. In Emma, Regency desserts were seamlessly joined to the end of dinner itself. The dinner passed away, the desserts succeeded. Postponing desserts with the modern, "oh, I'm too full right now, perhaps later" line was unheard of and clearly not as smart. Well, the best thing to do if you want your apple pie or apple tart, whatever it is you have, is not eat so much that you're too full for it. Also, it inconveniences the lady of the house if she has to, unless she's able to say, well, there it is, go and get it yourself. It inconveniences everyone. And it also makes an extra dish after everything's been cleared off. And I don't know, I just think it's kind of rude to say, no thank you, I'm not hungry, I'll have it later. It means someone's going to have to bring it to you later, maybe, unless you can get it yourself. The "oh, I'm too full now, perhaps" line was unheard of and clearly not as smart. After a full dinner, you're much more likely to treat dessert with natural moderation. That's right, it can be much more small if you eat it during, like right after dinner at the same seating, because at the same session, because you're going to be full and you'll only want a little bit. But if you wait, then your appetite increases and you eat too much. You're much more likely to treat dessert with natural moderation, with room enough to indulge in only a few bites. The more you delay dessert, however, the hungrier you'll become, and the bigger your dessert portions are likely to be. Well, ladies, it's time for me to go. I guess because I've been here more than an hour. I am striving to figure out how to get here more often, and I don't like waiting 2 weeks. But I do thank all of you for your prayers and for your wonderful comments and your support. They do encourage me. And I hope you got a few things done while you listen today. I don't edit because it would be so time consuming. And so in a natural seating where you would be talking to me and I'd be talking to you, we just kind of filter out the things that were mistakes or the and-us. And so I hope that you get a lot done today while you're listening, and I hope to see you a lot sooner. Bye, and stay close to Christ.